I've been talking about video games on this channel for a couple of years now, and if you've watched any of my videos, you may wonder, my game opinions, why should I believe anything you say, if you've never made a game yourself? You don't know the first thing about game dev or game design. And you would be right, which is why I actually made like at least 5 games, which you just saw in that montage. If you didn't know, I'm a computer science student. I know. I'm not specifically majoring in game development or game design, but I've had quite a few opportunities to create games for my assignments. Some were made on my own and some in a group. So today I'm gonna take you on a little tour through all of the different games that I've made. But before we get into that, I actually released 3 of the games on itch.io for free. They're not perfect, and I'll get into that later in the video, but if you want to download the games and try them out for yourself, the links are in the description. So at university, I'm majoring in computer science, but I'm also minoring in virtual reality. So I've done 4 papers where I just got to mess around with Unreal Engine, Unity, and Blender to make VR games. The first couple of projects I'm going to show you aren't really games, more so environments that you can walk around. I was inspired by the forests in Skyrim and Firewatch for this one. Building the actual scene in Unreal Engine was pretty simple once you know what you're doing. It's kinda like playing The Sims, dragging and dropping all of my trees and lampposts wherever I want them to go. Unreal Engine has different paintbrush-like tools to raise the terrain, add foliage, and draw different textures on the ground too. All of the assets here are free ones I found online, with the exception of this apple and this long net which I made in Blender. Look, it was my first time making a 3D model, okay? It's really hard. If you're wondering, do my 3D models get better? Not really. Anyway, you go down the desire path to grab the net, and use it to knock down the apple from the tree. Later, we moved on to Unity, and actually never went back to Unreal. This time, in a group of 3, I made a beautiful lake, inspired by Monet's series of water lily paintings. We wanted to start the player on an island in the middle, and then be able to walk around the ankle-deep water, loot lake type shit. We added some water, added some lilies, bada bing bada boom. This is where we did our first real bit of scripting, writing C# code that applies to certain objects in the scene. So now it looks like our lily pads are bobbing up and down in the water, but really they'd be moving up and down with or without the water there. We populated the lake with a bunch of cute flowers, mushrooms, rocks, mountains, and truffalo trees. So the final day is when we really had all of our issues. This one was kind of a mess. We didn't test the headset early enough. In our final video, which you're watching now, the player can't actually move, but whatever. I think it looks really pretty and vibrant, so it's not too bad. These early VR projects aren't perfect, none of the games in this video are, but they taught me the basics of using a game engine, laying the groundwork for some more advanced stuff later on. Now we have Escape the Colossus, one of the games which I just released on itch.io. Link in the description. This one I made in a course where we could basically choose any project and then work on it for the entire semester in a group of 4. There was a myriad of academic deliverables to do on the side as well, but I won't bore you with the details. In the first week, everybody pitched their ideas, and then people got assigned to the groups which had the most votes. My idea was to make a 2D platformer game in Godot, set inside of a giant colossus. You have to make your way through its insides, destroying the vital organs, and at the end make a daring escape out of the monster's mouth. Now, I had no experience with Godot, but I was hearing a lot about it online. This is when Unity wanted to charge developers every time someone ran their game, so everybody on Twitter was switching over to Godot. And at the same time, Brackies, who is apparently some kind of Danish game dev messiah, came out of retirement specifically to make Godot tutorials. So I watched those. I made a little platformer, which is very convenient because that's what we wanted to do. Godot also has its own language called GD Script, so I had to learn that too. It's pretty similar to Python, which I already know, so it wasn't too difficult to wrap my head around. Following along the tutorials was fun. You don't really have to think, you just do what you're told, and in the end you get a cute little game. But when we actually started the project, I'm suddenly just facing a blank scene with nobody whispering in my ear anymore. It's very overwhelming, especially later on when teammates start adding to the game too. Now when you go to work on it, there is a whole bunch of stuff on your screen which you didn't make and you don't understand, so you're too scared to touch it. But I got to work. We had all been assigned to different aspects of the game, and one of my jobs was player movement. I copied over the basic movement script from that tutorial I watched, which gave me a good foundation to work off of. I tweaked certain things like the velocity and the jump height, but then it was time to start adding more. I added coyote time and jump buffering to make the movement more responsive. Coyote time allows the player to jump a teeny bit after walking off of a ledge, even if they're not technically on a platform. Jump buffering allows the jump input to be processed right before the player hits the ground, instead of having to be done the exact frame they land. I knew that we wanted the player to unlock a double jump and a dash at some point, so I added those too. The thing about adding mechanics to a game is that I think it's pretty easy to just add a bare bones feature that does what you want it to do, if you use it in the exact right way. But players don't use it in the right way. Like with my dash, it moves you forward quickly, that is what I wanted it to do, perfect. But then I realized I need to make sure the player can't dash while they're already dashing. I need to make sure they can't dash more than once in midair. There was a bug where you couldn't dash while holding a directional input, and if you jumped and then dashed, you would gain a bit of height, so you could basically fly with it. The 10,000 different ways your mechanic can be misused all need to be accounted for, and that is where the development time gets spent. On top of the movement, I also did a little bit of level design, including the final level, which I'm pretty proud of. This one is hard, I think. For me, it's really easy because I made it, and we didn't have any actual testers outside of the group. I was happy to work on the final level because I could make it a real test for the player. Halfway through the level, you end up destroying the monster's final core, and then you have to race to the end of the level as you get chased by the rising acid. I was inspired by Ori and the Blind Forest, and I think I did a pretty good job. I did create a checkpoint feature just for this level. I don't think we used it anywhere else, but otherwise this level would have actually been too frustrating. So when you get to the top and beat the game, oh snap, the speedrun timer! Oh, it's the other thing I made. If you go to the settings, you can turn on the speedrun timer and race against the clock to see how quickly you can beat the game. I'll put a picture of my personal best time on the screen, so give it a go and see if you can beat my time. Maybe in the next video I'll give a shout out to the world record holder. That was Escape the Colossus. Check out the download link in the description, but let me just say as a little forewarning, once again the game is not perfect. None of the ones on itch.io are. You'll probably find some bugs in all of them. They also all had a lot of features which we didn't have time to implement. In the end, it was a school project, so that's the way things turned out. It isn't the best representation of our skill and what we could do in the future. We were trying to get better at game dev/programming and make a fun little game along the way. I just thought of putting it up online recently because why not? They're probably not going to be updated either, so if you do find any bugs, I don't know, deal with it. And now we have Blunder, probably the coolest game in this video and the one I had the most fun working on. But alas, it was never finished. But I mean, just look at this. Does it not look so fucking dope? This game was made once again for my virtual reality Miner, with the same two people I worked on the Lake project with. Our original idea was to do VR chess bowling, because one of us had made some chess piece 3D models and we thought may as well use them. And I thought that bowling would be a fun activity to do in virtual reality. Now for how the actual game would work, we had no clue. There is definitely some fun idea to find there. Maybe the bowling pins are chess pieces on a board. They move each time you bowl, and maybe each piece has a special power-up or something. Meanwhile, I played Hamster Hunter, a game which I talked about in my top 10 games of 2024 video. The game was honestly not the best, but it was fun to play with friends, and I really loved the art style. I kinda liked that the game was janky and imperfect. It made me feel like I could make a game like that too. Anyways, it turns out we didn't actually have to make a VR game this semester. We could kinda just make any game that would teach us skills transferable to VR development, which is when we got to work on our 3D horror game heavily inspired by Hamster Hunter and Slender Man. The player wakes up next to a burning plane in the middle of a dark, foggy forest. Now of course, the game is still based around chess. We're very lazy and we really wanted to use those models. Our protagonist, who perhaps was on the way to a chess tournament, spots a chessboard next to the plane and realizes that they've lost all of their pieces. Now they have to explore the forest and find all 6 different pieces and bring them back to the board. There is a map on the side of the plane which will point towards the general direction of each piece. and collecting them will display some text or lore on the screen. Instead of having the player be constantly chased throughout the forest, we wanted to instead give the feeling that they're being chased, or watched. The plan was to have little spooks throughout the game, creepy noises, flashlight flickering. We wanted it to be tense, but after collecting the final piece, the player would be chased by some kind of monster all the way back to the chessboard where the game would end. This was a good plan to base our game around, with a lot of freedom to implement whatever we wanted. We also needed to figure out a few things, like what was the monster going to be, why does the player need to collect their pieces, and what happens at the end. But we just got to work instead. We can figure all of that out later. We made a neat low-poly terrain, made a grass image all pixely, and then added it to the scene to where it rotates to face the player. We added trees, rocks, fog, a skybox, and a plane. And all of a sudden, this is already looking amazing. If you're wondering how many trees there are, and I know some of you are, the answer is 16,000. The fog looks so cool and adds so much to the vibe, and it's a little bit of an illusion. There is an invisible sphere around the player that just spurts fog toward them, so we're not actually covering the entire scene in fog particles. It was time to start working on some of the actual code, functionality for collecting and returning pieces, tracking progression, and displaying text. Now the crosshair changes to a little hand when you interact with something. I think this is a really neat stylistic change, yet it took us like 2 hours to figure out. It's pretty boring to talk about coding bugs, so I won't. We added a glowing effect to the pieces, but for a while the glowing made the entire scene glow for some reason. Here are 2 little rectangles we attached to the camera to be like Roblox arms, which we later replaced 2 pixelated images of one of our hands. We created a super nice looking typewriter effect for when you collect a piece. The screen also goes a little bit blurry for a bit too. During the mid-semester break, I created what I call a random spook, which has a very low chance of happening every frame. The goal is to have a bunch of these events that can happen randomly throughout the game, to increase tension and make it feel like there are evil vibes afoot. For this one, I changed the color grading, lowered the FOV and movement speed, and played a spooky R noise. Then everything just reverts back to normal. I made another random spook which creates a Dutch angle and plays a different creepy noise. And now we have a compass too. Since the map is only visible on the plane, we thought that adding a compass might be a nice thing to help out the player. So now we had all of the base functionality for our game, including a map which points toward the next piece. We just needed to put interesting locations in the forest and have a couple of scares in there too. The pawn piece we kept very close to the plane as a sort of tutorial. The night piece is a little bit further away in this lake atop a hill. It isn't quite as pretty as the previous lake we made. In fact, it is a blue transparent cube which we shoved underground. The rook is at the base of this giant tree in the middle of the map. I made a little trail of blood which leads around to the back where you see this man hanging. And when you approach... Ah! And by the way, the hanging man and the piece don't actually appear until you've returned the second piece. The bishop piece is hidden in the back of a church, which I think looks pretty good. We didn't end up making any scares in this area, but I was envisioning something like the lights going out and watching someone out the window. There is also a locked trapdoor on the floor of the church. How peculiar. The fifth area is the warehouse, where the queen piece is located. The inside is blocked off until you return the bishop, but once you go in, the piece is right there. Now if you activate that big brain of yours, you may realize that this piece is glowing red instead of the usual yellowy white. We all know that red is evil, so taking the piece will trap you inside the warehouse, and you'll have to navigate a maze to find the real queen. This area was fun to build. I added a few knickknacks in different rooms. I added this creepy guy waving and staring at you. And it's actually the same model who was hanging off the tree. In reality, it's because I was too lazy to get a different model. But who knows, we could write it into the story. Maybe he's your old chess teacher haunting you, and that's why you keep seeing him over and over again. Maybe he is the monster at the end of the game. While I worked on this area, my friends added a main menu and a starting cutscene. The final king piece is inside of a cave. In the room over here, you steal the piece from right underneath the monster's nose. And of course, it gets very angry and begins chasing you. But as you run back through the cave, there are boulders now blocking some of the paths. An alternative exit opens up and takes you out of that trapdoor which was in the church. From there, you run the piece back to the board and finish the game. Now, we didn't actually get around to making a monster of any kind, but we did make the cave with the boulders. And that is kind of where we ended our project. The semester came to a close and we had to submit a build of our game. Of course, there was so much more we wanted to add, like the final chase, and maybe some notes hidden around the forest to tell a story, a tutorial to teach the controllers to the player and make the goal more obvious, and a few more spooks around the map. Right now there are just invisible walls at the edge of the map, but I wanted to add a fog zone, where the screen would get more and more foggy as you walk further out, and then all of the fog would disappear and you're back at the plane. I think that would have been an interesting way of keeping the player in bounds, but I never got around to it. We also thought of adding an insanity bar, or a heart rate counter on the screen, along with making the game less linear, allowing the player to collect the first 5 pieces in any order they want. The amount of things that we could add is endless, but I'm proud of the stuff we did manage to add to the game. I think Blunder is cool as hell, even if it'll never be released. Now we have my final solo game called Pyromaniac, one of the games I released on itch. This one is from the only course I did specifically about game programming, which was aptly named Game Programming. But the thing about this course is that we weren't using a typical game engine. It wasn't about teaching us game design or how to use Unity, we were doing a lot of programming. And so we weren't using any engine to make our games, just writing raw C++ code. I'd also never done any C++, but it was very similar to every other language, so that wasn't too bad. I chose a very simple idea: horde survival. Enemies swarm you from the side of the screen. The aim is to kill and outmaneuver the horde while surviving for 5 minutes, at which point the final boss will appear who you need to kill to win the game. So, you know, kinda like Vampire Survivors, but stripped down a lot without any upgrades. I called it Pyromaniac because you have a flamethrower. You have to manage your heat bar, which is on the right side of the screen, and you can only shoot left and right, which is a creative decision that I made. A lot of people have told me,
"Oh, you couldn't figure out how to make it shoot vertically?"
Which is not true, you dickhead. The game would just be way too easy if you could shoot all 4 directions. This way your movement patterns have to be a bit more interesting and thought out. I made 3 different types of enemies, and the spawn rates of each type will change after every minute that passes in-game. I made randomly spawning power-ups, which will make you invincible, give your weapon no cooldown, or kill all of the enemies on the screen. Oh, and if you want to cheat, you can press backspace to activate some of the debug features. Without going into too much technical mumbo-jumbo, having no engine is really annoying and makes everything so much more finicky. I now appreciate how easy and convenient it is to just drag and drop objects around a scene. Scaling, rotating, and changing material through a window is so much nicer than having to type out everything you want to do. And because we had no engine, I was more limited in what I could add to the game. If we were using Unity or Godot, I could have made this game a lot more advanced in the time frame I had. Even flipping the sprite was surprisingly difficult. It took me a long time to figure out how to make the player face the opposite direction. And the reason the enemies don't turn to face you is because I didn't want to deal with that again. We had 4 weeks to make the game, but the first 2 were our mid-semester break, so I didn't start until the 3rd week. But for a game made in 2 weeks, I'm actually very proud of this one. I think it is genuinely fun to play. It started off looking like this, but now it looks like this. I added a couple of royalty-free songs, which I'm hoping actually are royalty-free, because I love the vibe they add to the game. One note I feel I need to mention first before you play the game is that I made this all on my little laptop screen, but I didn't make the game scale properly to larger monitors, so everything will be the same size whether you have a 720p monitor or a 4K one. Basically, the bigger your monitor is, the easier your game will be. Again, it's not perfect, but I'm not going to fix it. Give it a go and let me know in the comments what your highest score is. And now for my final VR project, we have Bob's Blossoming Business, a gardening game, this time actually made for a virtual reality headset. Once again, the game was made in that same group of 3 I worked on Blunder with. We had good chemistry going by this point, and it was pretty easy breezy working on the game. But once again, we did not finish. Not very good closers, are we? Don't know if I mentioned it, but VR is a pain in the booty hole to work with. We also just didn't have as much time as we did for our previous projects. It was the busiest semester of my life, which is also why my 4th video of the year is coming out in October. But enough complaining, we made a pretty good base functionality for a game. We wanted to make a gardening game where the player can plant, water, and sell flowers. We made a pretty scene with a nice beach and some trees on the side. Beside creating our models, it was basically just a lot of coding, trying to figure out how to make the watering and growth work nicely. Earlier I said that my 3D models don't really get better. I was lying. Look at these beautiful flowers I made. They're alright, but I am actually really proud of this sprout. I think it looks pretty nifty. We made a day-night cycle and a watering can with some fun little droplets. After planting the seeds, you water them and then have to wait 2 in-game days. When they're ready to be watered again, some glowing yellow particles will float up. It turns into a sprout, and after waiting 2 more days and being watered again, it grows into a flower. Then the flower can be cut with a sword and chucked into the shipping bin to earn the player some money. All of the features needed for a core gameplay loop are there: buying, planting, watering, growing, cutting, and selling. We just didn't really have time to present it in a nice way. In the current state, BBB is more of a tech demo. Everything works, but it could look a bit nicer, and some parts would need to be more fleshed out to be fun. Imagine you start with a few little plots of dirt and you can only afford certain flowers. But later on you unlock new areas with more space to plant, and new flowers too. When morning comes, you walk down your garden watering your rows and rows of flowers. The only thing the game needs would be something for the player to do during the day, while waiting for their plants to grow. We have a button to skip to the next day, but that is more of a debug feature. It would be cool to have upgrades for your tools as well. And finally, we have the third game that I put up on itch. Made in the same class as Pyromaniac, but instead of being a solo project, this one was made in a group of 4. Our group did a vote with some different genres of games, and it looked like everybody wanted to make a mining game, so that's what we did. We toyed with the idea of having a title like We Love Katamari, but decided that We Love Miners doesn't quite hit the same. We ended up settling on a Miner Setback. Once again, we didn't have a game engine, so we were still restricted in what we could create, but we now had more knowledge and quadruple the manpower. The idea for the game is that you dig down through a randomly generated grid-based mine to rescue your friend who's been caved in. The tiles you break will net you different resources which can be spent on the surface to upgrade your abilities. You also have to return to the surface every so often to refill your health and stamina, which decreases every time you break a block. On top of that, your friend has an oxygen level which is constantly going down and must be maintained by breaking these blue oxygen blocks. That was my idea. I'm not really sure how breaking these blocks would give him more oxygen, but I don't know. There are a few hazards underground like lava, mines, and spiders which will all kill you, so you gotta watch out for those while mining. It is also very possible to dig yourself into a pit with no way to get back up, meaning you'd have to restart. Making it 50 meters underground will trigger the final cutscene, meaning you have beaten the game. I'd hesitate to call the game a roguelike, but I don't know, maybe it is? Randomly generated map with no progression between games. I don't know, people get really passionate about genre debate sometimes, but let me know in the comments if you think this counts. Having 4 people made this project a lot easier to manage than the solo one. Not having to make every single feature myself made it a lot more enjoyable and chill. The video is getting pretty long right now, so I won't go on anymore. But download a Miner Setback, see if you can get to the bottom of the cave and rescue your friend. Don't forget to also download Escape the Colossus and Pyromaniac. All of the links are in the description. And shout out again to all of my teammates who helped with the creation of the games in this video. As somebody who plays a lot of games and talks about them and reviews them, I think that game dev is a useful experience and skill to have. It's like having a little look behind the curtain. Now that I have this knowledge, when I play a game, I think I could make this, or I should try making something like this, or I wonder how they made this. Like my third eye has been opened. And now I've been hooked. Now that I know I have the ability to make a game, I have so many things that I want to try and make. I love watching devlogs on YouTube, seeing the things that other people are making. My Twitter timeline has a bunch of game dev clips and it all just looks like a lot of fun. It's very inspiring. There's a guy I follow who's making a marble game. Well, he's actually making some gritty FPS game, but on the side he's making a marble game. And now I really want to make a marble game. That looks so cool. Now when I play a game made by a solo dev or a small team, I think, oh my god, that is awesome, I want to try something like this. I made a little list on Backlogged of games that make me want to make a game. I want to make a marble game, I want to make a survival horror game, I want to make a 2D Zelda type game, I want to make a narrative focused game like The Beginner's Guide. I have so many ideas. Though I haven't actually started making any game yet outside of school projects. I did dabble in Godot for a little bit and make this survival horror camera system, now I just need to draw the rest of the owl. Maybe one day I will make a real full game and release it to Steam. Or I mean, I hope I do. That sounds like a fun idea. With all of these projects, my favorite part is seeing the whole thing come together at the end, and being able to say, we made this. And that's the best part about making these YouTube videos too. After finishing each one, I have a complete project, all wrapped up with a little bow. All of the work that I've put into the different areas of creation, rounded up in one complete artifact. If that makes any sense at all, I don't know. I feel like I still only know the real basics of making a game. I don't know how to 3D model well or make pixel art. I've been coding for like 6 years, but I don't think I'm an especially good programmer. I don't know the first thing about making music. And if I wrote a narrative of some kind for a game, I don't have much confidence that it would be good. But the idea of learning all of these things, doing it myself and combining it into a full game sounds really exciting to me. I've only got 1 semester left before I graduate uni, but none of my classes are going to be fun game-making ones. However, if I do end up making another game, you guys will be the first to know. So make sure to subscribe if you're new around here and you want to see my videos in the future. And hey, thank you. Yes, you, for watching until the very end of this rather long video. Make sure to leave a like and comment "I love my game opinions," all capital letters, and I will give one of you who does that $1 million freaking dollars. Thank you for watching.